Hello and welcome back to the Summer Day Studios YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at how you can create environments in Maya, but also this will apply to Blender without it crashing and making your PC explode or slow down or anything else horrible that could happen to it. We are mainly going to be looking at how it's fun to do, but obviously they can slow down really, really quickly over time if you have hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands individual little assets like this grass or trees or rocks, and how you can fix that to make sure that your PC doesn't slow down and just make it generally more fun to work with. The main thing that comes to mind straight away is going to be lower poly models, which you probably already thought of, potentially opacity maps, and if you don't know what that is, we'll get into that later on in the video and I'll show you how that works. But there's something else that you can do, and that is called instancing. So as you can see here, I have a lot of grass, and that is just sitting on some terrain that I created earlier. And if you want to know how much grass it is, I have a mesh network here. That's 3,000 individual bits of grass, and that's made up of these parts here. So these aren't exactly the lowest poly bits of grass, especially when you have 3,000 of them. And while I'm just rotating around the viewport, that doesn't really seem to make much of a difference in speed. But if I wanted to make any changes to this whatsoever, for example, if I was to select this original grass and then try and update the scale of this to something like 1, you can see I'm trying to orbit now. The whole computer's frozen because of how many individual assets I have. And you can see now it's just gone and updated it. If you want to work on things quickly and just sort of have more of a fun time doing it, obviously that's not ideal. If I was to come back to our mesh network and try to add a new node, maybe I wanted a random node. Okay, I've just clicked random and you can see how long it takes to actually add it to this. I've just added it there, but it's still frozen and I still can't control my screen. I can't do anything. I can't interact with Maya because we're waiting for it to update. And that's not good. If you want to be making environments, that's going to take the fun out of it. It's going to make it a lot slower. And generally it's just lower performance. It's going to slow down your render times as well. However, if while I select my mesh network, I come up to mesh, go to utilities, and then switch to mesh geometry type, it then goes from geometry here to this new icon is called an instancer. And everything seems normal right now. And if I go to add a random node, you can see that's added immediately. Okay, if I just start changing these variables, you can see that updates completely on the fly. It doesn't look like it's slowed down at all. We might as well just have one piece of grass here, but yet we still have 3,000. We could potentially increase this up to 10,000 and then it still works pretty seamlessly. Okay, there's a little bit of slowdown now, but you can see it's really, really greatly reduced compared to when we had 3,000 bits of individual geometry, how much time that took to actually update anything here. So if you're using mesh to create environments, which many people often do in Maya, just to reiterate, you can come into mesh, go to utilities, and then go to switch geometry type with your mesh network selected. Make sure you're in the FX window as well, not modeling or anything else, and then you can update it from there. But even if you're not working in Maya and you're creating environments in Blender and using whatever tools they have there, like geometry nodes, for example, instancing is still going to save you so much time. This isn't a Maya specific thing. It's just sort of a generalist 3D thing. It works in so many different programs. It's not new by any means. But when you're creating really, really large scale detailed environments like this, where not this one's particularly large, but you get the idea it could be, if you have so many thousands of individual objects, instancing is just going to make everything so much easier to work with. So what exactly are instances if you're not sure? Well, basically object instancing in 3D is just a technique where multiple copies of an object are placed for our scene while all referencing the same original geometry, in that case, these individual bits of grass that we have. And there's just 4 here. What this means for you and your computer and whatever 3D application you're using is that it only has to load those 4 bits of grass or whatever else you're using to the memory of your computer, and it just propagates it all out to the rest of the scene. If we had 3,000 bits of grass, your computer now has to calculate those 3,000 individual bits of geometry and add that all to the memory, and that adds so much more time when it comes to actually kicking off your renders and modifying things. So referencing can really save you a lot of time there. This does also mean, though, that if you edit the original object, it's going to go ahead and update everything else. And that can be a negative, especially if you want some more uniqueness within your environment. But then oftentimes what you'll do is you'll have instancing for anything that's further away from the camera, and then anything that's really hero and up close to the camera and you need that detail and that, randomness to it, then you can just not use instancing for those specifically, but it's still going to save you so much time and memory on your computer. But the positive to having it affect every single object as well is that if you do need to make design changes and you want to propagate it out to your whole scene, you don't need to then go ahead and replace each individual object because everything's instanced from those few original ones anyway. So it just does it for you automatically when you update those. But of course, you know, even if this is an instance, the more I add to this, the slower it's going to get. So I could increase this up to 30,000. You can see now the actual scene is starting to lag a little bit. We can still update things on the fly, but it's getting a little bit slower. If I go ahead and increase this even up to 60,000, it'll do it. But you can see now things are lagging a hell of a lot more. This isn't very smooth anymore. And this is taking even longer to update. However, if we weren't using instancing, my computer, despite it being pretty good, in my opinion, it would have probably exploded by this point, right? So while instancing is going to save you a lot of headache and a lot of memory, it's not perfect, and you will eventually still run out of memory the more things you have, especially if you've got you know, you're approaching up into the hundreds of thousands of objects. So that's where having lower poly count items comes in handy. And one of the techniques that's used a lot, like I mentioned earlier, is opacity maps and billboard textures. So what is that exactly? Well, let's go ahead and hide everything. And I just have this very, very simple plane here. Okay, you can see this is two-dimensional because we can see the normals on the back. It doesn't have any thickness to it. And there's a few triangles in there, but it's incredibly simple. But this doesn't really look like grass. Well, if I go ahead and render this, you can see now it does in fact look like grass, and it almost looks three-dimensional as well. You can see as I rotate around it, I can see it from all angles. It doesn't disappear into the background. But you could just see earlier that it was a plane. So how exactly do you go about achieving that? Well, if we go ahead and open up my Hypershade editor with this material selected, you can see that while we still have the default diffuse or base color plugged in and the normal map, we also have this separate map here called an opacity map. If you look here in the top right, it's just a black and white image, and we're plugging this into the geometry opacity of our OpenPBR surface. This will work with most other materials as well. And again, this technique applies to basically any 3D software, like Blender and 3ds Max, for example. Although it might work a little differently and the nodes might be have different names, it still works the same way. So all this is saying to Maya is that the black is the area that we want to be cut out. We don't want that to be shown. That will not be rendered and will be transparent. The white part will not be transparent, and that's the part of the model that we actually want to be able to see. Okay, and you can see that's shaped like the grass. And then that also aligns with our diffuse texture. If I was to go ahead and hide just one of these planes and then render this now, you can see it still looks okay from the front, but if you come from the side, it kind of disappears, right? It just looks impossibly slim. So one technique that a lot of people use is that they will have two of these. You could potentially even have more. You could rotate it again, just so that no matter what angle you see this from, you're still going to see some grass, and it ends up making it look a lot more complicated. This is a technique that's used a lot in video games. You probably don't realize, but if you do look closer, you'll see this technique in use a lot. The use of opacity maps and billboard textures like this. But you can also use it for visual effects in your Blender renders, especially if you're using something like Eevee, where you're doing a real-time render, or if you're using Unreal or something like that. Although I know it's getting easier now to render humongous amounts of objects with nanite and things like that, but that's not the point of this video. This kind of stuff is really, really useful for if you're further away from the camera, like I said, or if you're not worried about having the highest amount of detail. You can see this still pretty much does the job. It's just not as nicely detailed as, you know, all of these individual bits of grass. So like with most things in 3D, it really depends on what your use case is and how much detail you need, and how much system resources you have as well. Be that memory, your GPU or CPU, or all three. So I hope that's been helpful. Thank you very much for watching. There's been a bit of a delay recently in content. I know we normally post on a Monday. I was on holiday for about a week. It was my mom's 60th birthday and we were away in Spain. So I didn't get a chance to post a long form, but we'll be back to it now and creating more videos. If you do have any suggestions, please do let me know. I always love to see those. Any questions at all, please do let me know in the comments as well. Your support is always massively appreciated. Some people have left some really lovely comments over time, and I greatly appreciate it. And I know, again, I say this kind of thing all the time, 3D can be scary, especially if you're new to it. There's so much to learn. I'm always learning. Everyone's always learning. The tippy top people that have been doing this for decades are still learning things. That's just how it goes. But that's okay. Don't be afraid. Keep trying out new things. Keep learning. Keep making mistakes. That's how we all learn. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.